Ex's revenge. She publicly humiliates her cheating ex. But things spiral out of control when he strikes back in an unbelievable way. I never thought I'd be the kind of person to post something like this online, but here we are. I was with Jake for almost 2 years. He was funny, charming, the guy everyone thought had his life together. But behind that smile, he was completely different. I trusted him with everything. My secrets, my heart, my future plans. And then I found out that it wasn't some small thing either. It was blatant. One night, I accidentally saw the texts on his phone, messages with her. The girl he had been seeing behind my back. Not just flirting, planning to meet, laughing about me, making fun of me. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach twist, and my hands shake. How could someone you love betray you so completely? At first, I froze. I didn't scream, I didn't confront him. I just sat there, staring at the screen, my heart breaking into pieces I didn't know I could survive. Then he walked into the room, all smiles, and my stomach dropped. I pretended I didn't know. I pretended everything was fine. I was too shocked, too angry, too humiliated to speak. The next day, I confronted him. I asked him directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" And he, lying straight to my face, as if I were crazy, said, "No, of course not. You're overthinking." I wanted to scream, to throw something, to break something. But instead, I left. I needed space. I needed to think. And as I walked away, I realized something. I couldn't let this go unnoticed. I couldn't just cry in my room and move on while he went around pretending like nothing happened. I needed the world to see him for what he really was. Not just for revenge, but for justice. That's where it started. My mind started racing with ideas. Small things first, subtle exposure, hints in places he'd never expect. But soon, I realized it wouldn't be enough. Not for the betrayal. Not for the humiliation I felt in those stolen moments while he laughed with her. I wanted him to feel the same raw, gut-wrenching shock I felt that night. And that's when the plan began to form. A week later, I found the perfect opportunity. Jake had a big night planned with friends. Dinner, drinks, all the usual look at me, I'm perfect routine. I knew exactly where he'd be and who would be there. So I showed up. Not quietly, not subtly. I wanted him to see me. To feel the tension before anything else even happened. I waited until the right moment. He was laughing, holding a drink, making jokes like he always did. And then I stepped forward, microphone in hand. Not literally, but everyone could hear me loud and clear. I started recounting moments he thought were private. Moments of betrayal, of lies, of backstabbing. People looked shocked. I could see the confusion in their eyes, the whispers starting. And then I said it plainly. Jake has been cheating. Not just once, not just a little thing. He's been seeing her behind my back for months. His face turned pale. His friends stared, unable to comprehend what they were hearing. And there she was, her name dropping like a bomb into the middle of the room. The girl he thought was hidden, the one he trusted to stay quiet. I made sure everyone knew exactly who she was. He tried to laugh it off, tried to make a joke, tried to act like it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. His world was cracking right in front of him. The people he cared about, the image he worked so hard to build, they were all looking at him differently now. And I stood there, calm, composed, victorious in a way I never thought I could be. That night, I realized something else. Revenge isn't just about making him suffer. It's about taking back control, about reclaiming my own dignity. And I felt a strange kind of power, a rush I had never experienced before. And I knew, deep down, this was just the beginning. Jake didn't stay quiet for long. Within a couple of days, the fallout from that night had reached him like wildfire. His friends were whispering, his social media was flooded with questions, and worst of all, he couldn't face me without that tension hanging in the air that he tried to fight back. First, it was passive-aggressive comments online, subtle digs in group chats, attempts to twist the story, make me look like the liar. But I had proof. Screenshots, messages, dates, witnesses. Every attempt he made to reclaim his reputation just made him look worse. And with every post he made, I silently watched, knowing I had already won the public perception war. Then he took it further. He showed up at my workplace, trying to corner me in front of my colleagues, pretending it was all a misunderstanding. But I was prepared, calm, collected, and fully aware of the scene he was trying to stage. I refused to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Instead, I left him standing there, sweating, frustrated, and more humiliated than ever. the escalation didn't stop there. I started noticing subtle things: mutual friends avoiding him, messages from people who once ignored me but now sought reassurance that I was okay, respect slowly shifting in my direction. The power dynamic had changed, and I realized that revenge wasn't just about ruining him. It was about exposing the truth, taking back the narrative, and finally being seen as the one who mattered. And through it all, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of satisfaction, knowing that he had underestimated me from the very beginning. Just when I thought I had everything under control, an unexpected ally appeared in the most unlikely way. Lila, a coworker I barely knew, came up to me one morning in the break room. At first, I assumed she was just making idle chit-chat, but there was a sharp glint in her eyes, a subtle intensity that told me she knew more than she let on. "I think you're handling this situation better than anyone expected," she said, leaning in so no one else could overhear. "But if you really want to make sure he never hurts anyone else again, I can help you." I froze for a moment. Help? From a coworker? Who was she really? But as she spoke, she revealed small details about Jake that I hadn't known. Little manipulations, lies, moments where he had twisted situations to his advantage long before our drama. The more she talked, the more I realized she had been quietly observing him for years. Lila wasn't just offering help. She had insider knowledge that could make my plan precise and airtight. Over the next few days, we became an unlikely team. We met secretly, sharing information, collecting screenshots, messages, and other evidence that mapped out Jake's pattern of manipulation. We planned how the truth could come out publicly without giving him any chance to spin it against me. Each new piece of evidence was like a puzzle fitting perfectly into place, painting a picture of him as someone toxic and deceptive, someone who couldn't be trusted by anyone. Lila's presence gave me a boost I didn't even know I needed. Before, I had been angry, frustrated, and slightly reckless. But now, with her guidance, my revenge could be strategic, calculated, and devastating. I started to see that this wasn't just about personal satisfaction anymore. It was about creating a chain reaction, showing him and everyone around that actions have consequences. By the end of that week, I felt unstoppable. Jake's casual arrogance, his smug confidence, even his small attempts to intimidate me at work, everything crumbled in the face of our preparation. And deep down, I realized that having an ally who understood the stakes and could operate in the shadows gave me a power I hadn't imagined. This wasn't just revenge, it was an art, and I was finally ready to paint the masterpiece. The day of the public exposure arrived, and I could feel the tension buzzing in the air like static electricity. I had chosen the perfect setting, a weekend art gallery opening that Jake was known to attend. Everyone important, everyone with a social media following, and, most crucially, everyone who knew Jake's carefully curated image of perfection would be there. I arrived early, dressed sharp, exuding a confidence that had been forged over years of silent planning. Lila was already there, discreetly setting up a little surprise that would ensure no one could doubt the truth once it came out that I watched Jake arrive, completely unaware. His usual cocky smile was plastered across his face, like he owned the room. He had no idea that every little interaction, every whispered lie, and every manipulation he had performed would be laid bare tonight. As he mingled, I casually approached, letting our brief eye contact spark a subtle tension. No one knew what was coming, but I could feel the curiosity beginning to ripple across the room. Then it started. I gave a casual, innocent-looking nod toward the projection screen in the corner, and Lila triggered the sequence. Screens across the gallery lit up, displaying messages, photos, and private conversations, all undeniable evidence of Jake's lies and betrayals. The crowd's initial curiosity turned into audible gasps. People whispered, shocked by what they were seeing. Jake's face drained of color, his confident mask cracking. He tried to laugh it off, but his voice wavered. And the more he protested, the more obvious it became that every accusation was true. That I could see the betrayal in his friend's eyes, the subtle distancing of people who had once admired him. And then came the hardest blow. His girlfriend, whom he had used as a shield and a trophy, looked at him with disbelief and disappointment that cut sharper than any words I could have thrown. I didn't need to say anything. The screen, the evidence, and the silence did all the talking. Every tiny humiliation, every betrayal, Every secret manipulation he had performed over the years was now out in the open for everyone to witness. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief as I watched him crumble. This was the moment I had waited for. Years of anger, planning, and quiet endurance had led to this perfect exposure. I had not just revealed his lies. I had reclaimed the narrative, rewriting the story of our past with me in control. And deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The opening act of the final chapter where he would finally understand the consequences of his actions after the public exposure. Jake was a shell of his former self. The gallery incident had not only humiliated him in front of friends and colleagues, but had also made him painfully aware of the fragile illusion he had built around his life. I watched from a distance, savoring the subtle shift in the room's energy. People whispered as he passed, glances that once carried admiration now laced with pity and judgment. But the real prize was still ahead, his girlfriend, the one who had been part of his shielded image. The person he thought he could rely on to maintain his perfect facade. That I approached her casually in the aftermath, my movements deliberate, confident. I knew she had been observing the fallout with a mix of shock and curiosity. Her eyes met mine, and I could feel a silent understanding pass between us. I smiled, the kind of smile that suggested familiarity, confidence, and an unspoken promise of something new. The years had changed me. The insecure, bullied version of myself had vanished, replaced by someone who had mastered charm, subtlety, and control. Conversation flowed naturally at first. Small talk, laughter, shared observations about the gallery, and the chaos surrounding Jake. I could see the walls around her slowly softening, her attention shifting, drawn to the intensity one projected. Every word I spoke, every laugh, every glance was calculated, designed to intrigue, to seduce, to pull her closer while maintaining the perfect balance of mystery. By the end of the evening, it was undeniable. She was interested, captivated, and most importantly, curious about me in ways she had never been about Jake. I had no illusions about her feelings. I didn't need her to love me. I needed her to be a mirror of Jake's own desires, a tool to drive home the final lesson. I let the tension build subtly, never forcing, always guiding. One look, one touch, one whispered comment. And she leaned in closer, drawn by the charisma and confidence I had cultivated over years of careful planning. As we parted that night, I left her with a casual, almost accidental touch on the arm, a hint of a smile that promised more. Jake was still in the room, oblivious to the storm that was brewing. I had planted the seed. Now, it was only a matter of time before it grew into the perfect instrument of his undoing. The power dynamics had shifted, and I could feel the thrill of control coursing through me. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about proving that the bullied, overlooked kid had risen, and in doing so, had turned the world upside down. The tension between Jake and me was palpable the moment we crossed paths again. I had orchestrated it perfectly, an exclusive dinner at a high-end restaurant, an accidental encounter that felt natural yet entirely under my control. Jake's eyes widened slightly when he saw me across the room, recognition mixed with disbelief. The boy he once mocked, laughed at, and humiliated now exuded power, wealth, and an aura of untouchable confidence. His girlfriend sat beside him, unaware of the storm about to hit her life. I approached with deliberate calm, smiling warmly, shaking his hand with a strength and authority that made him flinch just slightly. The subtle shift in the air was intoxicating. The waiter brought drinks, and I casually joined the table, a seat beside her, my presence commanding attention. Every glance I exchanged with her carried unspoken promises and curiosity. Jake tried to maintain composure, but it was cracking. His questions were clipped, his laughter forced. Every attempt to assert dominance, to reclaim the superiority he once held over me, fell flat. I responded with casual charm, anecdotes of success, travels, and experiences that he could only dream of. His girlfriend's eyes drifted toward me repeatedly, curiosity and fascination clear in her gaze. I didn't rush. I let Jake squirm, letting every moment of discomfort linger like a drawn-out punishment. The crucial moment came when I casually touched her hand. Just once, in a perfectly innocent gesture while laughing at a shared joke. Her reaction was instantaneous: surprise, interest, and an undeniable spark that Jake couldn't ignore. I could see the confusion in his eyes, the realization that the illusion of control he had built around himself was crumbling. His girlfriend was responding to me, to the subtle display of power and confidence I had honed over years of careful preparation that I leaned in slightly. Whispering a comment meant only for her. Light, playful, and suggestive without being overt. Jake's jaw tightened, and his hand fidgeted nervously on the table. I watched with satisfaction as the fragile walls of his life, the image he carefully curated, began to collapse. The humiliation was no longer subtle. It was clear, a slow-burning fire of envy, frustration, and helplessness by the end of the dinner. It was undeniable. The dynamics had shifted. Jake was no longer in control. His girlfriend's attention had shifted, fully engaged in the unspoken tension I had created. I left the table with a casual smile, a lingering glance at her that promised more, knowing Jake could only watch. The confrontation had been won without a single raised voice. Without violence, my victory was in the psychological domination. The complete reversal of the power he once held over me. The morning after the dinner, the fallout hit like a storm. Jake tried to act as if nothing had changed, but the subtle cracks in his demeanor betrayed him. Every glance from his girlfriend now carried curiosity and a hint of desire. The way she looked at me yesterday etched into her expression permanently. I didn't need to do anything drastic. Just existing as the version of myself he had spent years mocking was enough. He sent her a text later. A carefully composed message trying to reclaim the emotional territory he assumed was still his. I could see it on social media, the tension in the comments, the subtle change in her captions. She wasn't responding the same way. Her messages were shorter, her emojis less enthusiastic. And with every read receipt that lingered unanswered, Jake's confidence eroded that I watched from a distance, savoring the quiet chaos I had sown. At work, I bumped into her accidentally, each interaction carefully calibrated. A laugh here, a gentle touch there, enough to make her think of me, to compare me unconsciously to Jake. I could see the excitement in her eyes when I mentioned a recent trip or a high-profile event I attended. Meanwhile, Jake's attempts to maintain control felt desperate, pathetic almost, and the humiliation was intoxicating. Finally, it happened. She told me she couldn't resist coming over, that she needed to see me. Jake, of course, didn't know the full extent until he walked into his own living room and found her gone. Her apartment empty, her bag missing, only a note left behind. The note was simple. I needed to see someone who respects me. Don't try to contact me. Jake was left stunned, a broken man, staring at the emptiness, realizing the full scale of his loss. My revenge was complete. Not only had I proven my superiority through success, but I had taken something he believed was untouchable, her attention, her affection. And the cruelest part? She had been nothing more than a pawn in the ultimate game of payback. My smile was private, satisfied, knowing I had orchestrated every step perfectly. The thrill wasn't in hurting her, it was in punishing him. The thrill was in watching the boy who tormented me in high school crumble under the weight of his own arrogance, forced to confront the reality that life hadn't given him power. My persistence and success had taken it. A few days later, the story started leaking. Not because I wanted it to, but because chaos has a way of spilling over. Someone had noticed her sudden disappearance, and whispers began circulating online. Social media was merciless. Mutual friends speculated, tagged, and commented. Every post she made, or didn't make, was analyzed, dissected, and twisted. I stayed calm, pretending I was just another observer. But inside, I reveled in the unfolding spectacle. Jake tried to maintain control, posting vague, cryptic statuses about trust and loyalty, but no one bought it. The narrative had already flipped. People who once envied his charm now laughed at his helplessness. Memes were born overnight, subtle jabs that reflected everything I had orchestrated. The most satisfying moment came when she finally posted. A single photo, elegant and confident, captioned simply, "Sometimes you realize who's really worth your time." Every comment was a reminder of the power shift. Friends congratulated her. Others criticized Jake, and a few directly tagged him. Pointing out the irony of his situation, Jake tried to contact her. Desperate, pleading, but she didn't respond. And even if she had, it wouldn't have mattered. By this point, the humiliation had spread far beyond our little circle. His reputation, once untouchable, was shattered. He wasn't just embarrassed privately. He was a cautionary tale for everyone around us. I watched it all unfold quietly from my office, smiling as the pieces fell perfectly into place. Success had been my weapon, charm my strategy, and social perception my final blow. He had underestimated the subtlety of a calculated revenge, thinking brute confrontation or anger could undo years of pain. But life had shown him otherwise, and the public spectacle ensured he'd remember it forever. The power wasn't just in taking her. It was in taking control, rewriting history, and watching him realize that all the years he spent mocking me had only fueled my ultimate victory. And yes, somewhere deep inside, I allowed myself a private chuckle imagining him scrolling endlessly, trying to understand what went wrong while I moved on. Untouchable. Jake's world started crumbling the moment he realized no one was on his side anymore. Messages went unanswered, calls ignored, and even his closest friends began avoiding him. The social media backlash wasn't slowing down, it was accelerating. People dug up old stories, embarrassing photos, and half-forgotten rumors, all framing him as the arrogant, unfaithful jerk he had always been. Beneath the surface. He tried to reach me indirectly, sending passive-aggressive messages through mutual friends, but I ignored them all. It wasn't about confrontation anymore. It was about letting him drown in the chaos he had created. Every attempt he made to defend himself backfired, making him look more desperate, more pathetic. Meanwhile, she posted pictures with friends, laughing at events he wasn't invited to. Each post was a dagger, a reminder that she had moved on, but more importantly, that he had lost control. And control had always been everything to him. The humiliation didn't stop at social media. People at work began whispering. Old acquaintances who once admired him now mocked him behind his back. Even strangers on the street seemed to sense the collapse. Smirks, sideways glances. It was as if the universe itself was joining in on the punishment. One night, I caught a glimpse of his stories, long, rambling, desperate posts about mistakes, regret, and trying to fix things. But it was too late. His pleas, his attempts to salvage his pride, only highlighted how powerless he had become. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Satisfaction because justice, in my view, had been served. Pity because no one else could save him from the monster of his own, e.g. by the end of that week. Jake wasn't just embarrassed, he was broken. The boy who once mocked, threatened, and controlled was now a cautionary tale, publicly humiliated and privately devastated. And I, sitting in the background, watched it all unfold with a quiet, cruel satisfaction. This was revenge at its purest, and the taste was sweeter than anything I had imagined. That it was all coming together. Jake, completely broken, was no match for the image I had carefully crafted, the one of success, charm, and untouchable allure. She, knowing just enough about him to understand the role she could play, became the perfect instrument for the final act. That I approached her with calculated charm, every word measured, every gesture precise. She was curious, intrigued, and admittedly flattered by the attention of someone so obviously in control of his life. We spent time together in public, flouting the glamorous lifestyle I had built, making sure Jake saw everything. Every dinner, every party, every shared laugh was a reminder of his failure, a public display of my victory. Jake tried to intervene at first, messaging her, showing up at places uninvited, desperate attempts to reclaim control. But by now it was too late. I had already ensnared her attention, not with love, not with genuine emotion, but with power and success. Every look she gave me, every subtle touch, was a hammer against Jake's pride. And then, the moment I had been waiting for, I ended it. Publicly, but without theatrics. A brief message, cold and precise, letting her know she was no longer needed. She, bewildered but understanding her role, complied. Jake, witnessing the ultimate betrayal, crumbled further. The humiliation was complete. He realized that I hadn't just bested him. I had used the one thing he cherished most to destroy him utterly. That I walked away that night with no guilt, no hesitation, only the intoxicating satisfaction of revenge. He had mocked me, controlled me, and hurt me in the past, and now he was left with nothing but his own shattered ego. She was gone, yes, but that had never been the point. The point had been to remind him, publicly and painfully, that I was the one who had won. And in that victory, I found a dark, unshakable pleasure that lingered long after the echoes of his despair faded. The days after were quiet, but the silence was heavy. Jake avoided my calls, my messages, my world. Every attempt he made to recover, to explain, to reclaim some shred of dignity, ended in embarrassment. The social circles we once shared whispered behind closed doors, piecing together the spectacle they'd witnessed. My reputation only grew stronger. My control over the situation was absolute. She had faded from my life as quickly as she entered it, leaving no trace but the memory of her role in the perfect revenge. It was an odd mix of satisfaction and emptiness. I had won, undeniably, but the thrill of using someone as a tool for vengeance left a bitter aftertaste. I didn't regret it. Not once. Every smile I gave in public, every handshake in the business world, was a reminder that I had rewritten the past on my terms. Jake was different now. Humiliated, broken, and cautious. He had learned that cruelty has consequences, and that the people he underestimated could rise far beyond what he imagined. I had shown him that the world doesn't forget, and sometimes it rewards patience and cunning over strength. Scrolling through the news one night, I saw a feature on my latest venture: successful, admired, untouchable. A small smirk crossed my face. Revenge had been sweet, yes, but perhaps the real satisfaction came from knowing that I had outlived his shadow entirely. The past could no longer touch me. And yet, somewhere deep inside, a question lingered. Did I truly win, or had I lost a piece of myself along the way? The answer didn't matter. For now, the world saw me as I had always dreamed: victorious, feared, untouchable. And sometimes that was enough.